Football Monday here on Birds 365. You got John McMullen Jody McDonald, and another M. Our buddy Geoff Mosher from InsideEagles.com. Good enough
Inside
to
the
jump
Birds. InsideTheBirds.com.
InsideTheBirds.com.
New backdrop, by the way, Geoff. Look at that.
Well, yeah, whoa, where'd you get that?
You like that?
That's pretty cool. That's almost as good as Ocean's behind us. And you probably can wear green. Is yours is dark? Ours is light. Yours is dark. You can wear any color you want, huh?
Yeah, it's great. It's actually we have two logos, one with me and Adam, and then this one. This one, I don't use this as a backdrop much, but this is our alternative. It's like the home and road uniform. We got the home and road logo.
Yeah. Gotta switch it up. Yeah, we're gonna get some uniform talk, which drives me insane. Jeffrey Lurie's gonna break out some uniform news, I would imagine, at the NFL owners meetings. But I want to start in more substantive places, Jeff, with you. Terrell Edmunds, I said in the first segment of I can't figure out why this kid can't get any money. He's 26. He's started for 5 years on what's usually an above average defense, pretty solid defense. PFF numbers are good, not great. Not a splash player, but he can't make more than $2 million. I get why Rashad Penny got his contract. I get why Greedy Williams got his contract. Justin Evans, Nicholas Morrow. This kid, there's got to be something. What am I missing?
I don't know, John. I think it's a good question, other than to say that it was a really, really deep free agent market at safety. We saw about 5 or 6, between Marcus Epps and Donovan Wilson and Von Bell and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Jesse Bates, and there are probably 2 other guys who I'm not mentioning, or I'm just forgetting. I mean, and sometimes we see this. There's always sometimes kind of a glitch in the free agent system at position. There's a hot name because, like, a guy like Marcus Epps was coming off. Is Marcus Epps a better safety than Terrell Edmunds? They're very similar, but Edmunds has started more. To your point, Edmunds has more experience, and he was a first-round pick, but there's something about Marcus Epps in the season he just came off of, and he's younger, that probably made him more enticing to the Raiders. I think Edmunds' issue, if you want to call it an issue, is that after 5 years, he is what he is, and he's probably shown you what his ceiling is, as opposed to maybe some of the other guys who have signed and might be younger or more versatile. Like Von Bell's a better cover guy, probably. So, I just think that's the story of Terrell Edmunds. Good player, not a great player, probably a little overdrafted in the first round, although I don't remember, who went in the bottom of the first round. Doesn't make a whole lot of plays, steady Eddie type of thing.
Right, but a guy like DeMonte, and if I'm mispronouncing his last name, please get it right for me. KZ.
They really like him.
The Steelers safety, who, oh, by the way, they were a team that tried to incorporate 3 safeties last year with Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. Mm-hmm. Why does he get $3 million and Edmunds only gets 2? And Edmunds is a guy who certainly took more snaps and seemed to be as important, if not more important, to their defense. I'm with John on it. I just don't know how the Eagles got this guy. It's almost one of those, you hear the number and you go, wait, why?
Right.
Shouldn't they have had to pay more for this guy than they did? If it's just Howie being that great a negotiator, I'd love to tip my hat to Howie, but I'm not sure I understand how he pulled it off.
Yeah, the KZ thing is strange. They really like him. He's 29 years old. I know he had been with a couple of teams before the Steelers. Now he played less snaps. I believe he was injured last year. And then when he came back from an injury, they wanted to get him on the field more. So I think that's why he played fewer snaps than Evans, but they do like him a decent amount. I don't know if it's that he's just a better complement to Minkah Fitzpatrick. I know he's a little bit more of a cover guy, I think, because he's a little lighter, a little shorter. And that's what the league is looking for. They're looking for safeties who can run and cover. And he's probably a better option for them at that than Edmunds, who's more of a box kind of safety. And I would guess, and I don't know KZ really well, but one thing on Edmunds is that he's not considered like an above average athlete. So, they're always looking for people, again, run, cover, traits, things like that.
Now, Jeff, that leads me into my next point that I'm confused about. I think we all think Sean Desai is going to continue down the Vic Fangio route. And if they do that, you don't have free and strong safeties. You have left and right safeties. You have mirrored safeties. That's the whole point of the defense. We got to confuse the quarterback till post snap, and then you get that extra split second, and you blah blah blah. This guy's a traditional strong safety. So is that telling us that Sean Desai's more open-minded? Is it just, well, this is the best player we could have gotten at this point in the process, and we got to wait till we find somebody to play what we really want to play? From the fit standpoint, this didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I contacted somebody who's giving me some really good information on the Eagles defense, and he said the same thing I did. Yeah, I don't get it. Have you talked to any people? Do you get the fit aspect of this?
No, I don't really get the fit aspect, but I get the I think I get the sort of, you had zero safeties. You need experience. You need someone to play. And right now with the experience that he has, he's clearly their most experienced and probably their only definitive starter on the depth chart. Now, if the Justin Evans kids is healthy and plays like he did before, even last year and then before missing 3 straight years, well, then maybe they found something there. And that's a guy who, you're right, John, fits the scheme a whole lot better. There have been a couple of players. I'm trying to think. Last year, there was a player that the Eagles signed who I also questioned the fit. I can't remember. And they wound up making it work. John Gannon, as you know, John, made it work up front with maybe not having all the types of players.
Would have Jannard Avery. Yeah.
Jannard Avery. Great point. Yeah. So sometimes you just need, and this is why, to go back to Jody, why is he only getting one year? Why is he getting so little money? Is because right now he's kind of a placeholder, a stopgap, much like the Eagles have done at linebacker for a lot of years. And if they're able to bring in somebody better through the draft, the trade market, whatever, then that guy plays. And if that person fits the scheme more, that guy plays. It is really amazing that a guy who started as many games as Edmonds just didn't have a better market. It's not like safety play around the NFL is at some elite level.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I'm talking like $4 million. I'm not talking
right.
Big, it's amazing to me that many starts that age. Those are the guys you're supposed durable. Yeah. Those are generally the guys who get paid in free agency.
Yeah. Well, to your point though, that the Fangio scheme is certainly spread. The Eagles are one of like 1 billion teams running.
Yeah.
They probably all looked at Terrell Edmonds the same way.
Good point. Good point. Jody, you're muted.
He sounds better that way.
Thank you for that, Johnny Mac. I forgot I coughed. I've run this by every Eagle guest we've had the last 10 days or so, and we haven't had you on since free agency kicked in. The whole Isaac Seumalo leaves, not a problem. We'll just plug our backup center in as our starting right guard next year, and everything will be okay because Jeff Stoutland says so. He just waves his magic wand, and guys transfer positions, and they're as good as the individual that they're replacing. And it's happened a bunch of times. But it's not a guaranteed every single time. Do we put it sounds like almost blasphemy to say it, but do we put too much stock in everything will be fine just because we have Jeff Stoutland on the offensive line?
Can I answer that question like 6 weeks into the season? I mean, you're right.
Unfortunately, the Eagles are answering it now.
Yeah, well, I mean,
do you think that first-round draft pick is going to be a potential guard who can step in and play for the Eagles next year?
No, I don't think it will. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think it will be. But I mean, to answer your question, I mean, you always, I don't think it's just Jeff Stoutland. Anytime you draft a player in the first or second round, right? Jordan Davis, I mean, you're hoping that they live up to what you saw on tape. And if you have good coaching in that position, you're expecting the marriage of what you saw. It's not like they overdrafted him in the second round. He was a second round talent, and they've got a great offensive line coach, so it should work. Now, what I suspect the Eagles will do, Jody, is look for some veteran offensive line help, because losing Dillard, and releasing Opeta, although he's back. I'm on there. He'll probably be on the practice squad again. But they've had good backups, right? For the last few years, just in case a starter didn't work out or got hurt. They're not nearly as deep after losing Dillard and losing Sayamalu as they used to be. So I get your point there. In case something doesn't work out at right guard, you do have Driscoll. But I do imagine that they will try to bring in some more help there on the offensive line just in case. But that guy's going to be your starter because he's year 2 and he's a second-round pick, and you got to get him in there. And, the best thing that happened for him last year was also the worst thing. The best thing was he got to play center when Jason Kelsey needed the elbow surgery last year in training camp. So we got a lot of great reps and showed, at least in the preseason, that it looks like he's a good player and that he can step in there. But they were trying to cross-train him at right guard at the time. And so they had to move him to center, and he really never got that right guard cross-training last offseason as they were hoping to get. So he'll get it this year, imagining, unless Jason Kelsey's going to be hurt again. And then they'll see.
Yeah. And it's more than just Camp Jurgens. So to kind of expound on that, Jeff, really a group of 5 players that the Eagles kind of baked in. They knew they were going to lose players. Howie was honest about that. And Cam's one of them. You mentioned Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, and I'd add Milton Williams as a third-year player for Javon, and Reed Blankenship as well as an undrafted free agent. Of those 5 guys, who are you most confident in? You don't worry about. Who are you least confident in? Ironically, Reed Blankenship, besides Milton, Reed Blankenship is the one we saw the most of, even more than Jordan Davis.
Yeah, how about that? So wait, my 5 were Jurgens, Dean, Blankenship,
Jordan Davis, Blankenship, Milton Williams. Yeah.
Okay. Probably Jurgens. And it's really, I guess there's question marks on everybody. Nakobe Dean would be a close second, but without knowing who's that front line, that starting front line, it's hard to know how the linebackers are going to play. I think they go hand in hand. It's a big deal. I don't know that they view Milton Williams as a starting defensive tackle. I think they like his pass. And that's a big thing too, is with Sean Desai, we're sort of still waiting to see what he likes in his personnel up front. He had a big stout team in Chicago, guys like Akeem Hicks inside, and he had some really big bullies. Ooh. And this is not a big stout defensive line. It's a fast, quick, athletic defensive line, which there's nothing wrong with. But as we've seen in the past, that's hurt them up the middle defensively, especially against the run. Obviously they're not any bigger or more stout against the run. In fact, they're a little bit less so now. So we'll see. The linebacker they signed, Morrow, is a good player too, but he's more, again, he's not a very big guy either. Another converted safety.
215. They try to put him in. Yeah.
And Nakobe Dean, when people talk to me about him, NFL people who evaluated him, he obviously fell to the 3rd round. A lot of it was injury related, but also, the tape showed that he's a sideline to sideline guy. He's not necessarily a guy who wants to go head into the hole and take on big ball carriers and big offensive linemen coming at him. That's not his game as much. He's really smart, so he can figure it out, and he's a good player. Probably figure it out, but I remember last year someone said, don't, if one of these guys gets hurt, don't expect him to be the savior of the run defense, because if they're going to take aim at our middle, which a lot of teams did, that's not his style of game.
I fear you're right. I hope you're wrong about Milton Williams not being a starting defensive tackle, just a rotational guy. If you are right, who's going to start? Who? I don't want any part of replacing Javon Hargrave, but he's gone, and somebody has to step in there, and they're not going to be able to do what he did. But somebody's got to get those snaps and, quote unquote, as a starter.
Right.
This is not a great draft for defensive tackles, at least not at the top. None that merit going in the top 10. So we know.
I'm buying the Pitt kid. I'm all in.
I'm buying the Pitt kid. I like the Pitt kid a lot.
At 10, you think he's going to be worthy of taking him at number 10?
I just did my latest mock draft. I had Cansey going number 10 to the Eagles. I'm buying it. I'm all in.
No, I could see it. I've got great feedback on him from people who evaluate him. I mean, there's other than the size, there's not a whole lot of knocks on the kid. So, listen, the beauty of it being only March 27th is that you've got 6 months before you have to answer that question. You know, we didn't know at this time last year who was going to be the Eagles safety next to Marcus Epps. It wound up being CJ Gardner-Johnson. We didn't know at this time this year who was going to be that corner opposite Darius Slay. At this time last year, it was Zach McPherson. Then it became James Bradberry. So, Howie is not blind to this, I'm sure. And he'll do his best to get a guy in there,
Yeah.
Listen, the one thing is that you may not be as good as you were last year defensively, and that's okay. I mean, you can't be the same team every single year, right? And so you're going to be most likely a good, if not elite, offensive team, and you might have to just lean on that a little bit more than normal.
Yeah, I've been talking about that for a while, Jeff. Even if they got Jonathan Gannon back, even if Howie was some kind of wizard and got the salary cap increased and kept Javon Hargrave and TJ Edwards and everybody else, law of averages, they're not going to be as good.
Right.
They're not getting 70 sacks again. I can tell you that.
No.
Number 2 overall, number 1 in passing defense, probably not, even with
Right.
all those players back. So that said, you feel sorry for Sean Desai because he's going to come in with those expectations. I mean, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
But there's a large portion of this fan base, and I get it every day because I love Gannon, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
He wasn't good enough. Well, you got to be better then.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
So Sean Desai is going to have a really awesome first 3 or 4 months as defensive coordinator for the Eagles. And when I say 3 or 4 months, I mean like now, because he's not Jonathan Gannon and he's Sean Desai and everybody loves him. And he had a great year in Chicago, even if the Bears stunk. But when September and October roll along, he's probably going to get Jonathan Gannon treatment, if not worse. So yeah, he's sort of walking into a buzzsaw in that regard. But it's hard to.
God, sorry, Jeff.
I was just, I don't know, other than CJ, where it still boggles my mind that the Eagles didn't want to match that. Letting a lot of these guys go and bringing the right guys back, I think they've done the right things as far as making the right moves. I mean, this was a good defense last year, no doubt, but it wasn't the Legion of Boom. Seattle, they made sure they brought back Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas and Bobby Wagner. I think with what you saw last year, you probably maxed out on some of the guys who went out and walked in free agency, and that happens.
Is Fletcher Cox a $10 million player, or was he a $10 million player because the Eagles were losing Javon Hargrave and they couldn't afford to lose both?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, if he's going to, I imagine he's still going to start for this team and play at least 60% of the snaps, and he's going to play it. He's still a good, what do you have? How many sacks did he have last year? Seven. I mean, go look at the number of defensive tackles who average 7 sacks in the league. I bet you they're making around $10 million or more. I know he's a little older, and there are times where he disappears a little bit, but go try to live life without Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave.
Yeah, that's a good point. You brought up another good point a little bit earlier when we were talking about Edmonds and, maybe some of the things that were limiting his value. So many teams played the damn, Fangio defense. At what point is there a tipping point, Jeff? I've been talking about this. We saw it. You just mentioned Legion of Boom, cover 3. We saw it with cover 2. Everybody's a copycat. Oh, let's play Tony Dungy's defense. Then there's that tipping point. People see it too much. It becomes too easy to deal with. I think we're at that tipping point with the Fangio defense. Even Vic said it himself when he went to Miami. He's like, too many people are playing this damn defense. I gotta shift some things up. Should the Eagles be ahead of that curve?
Well, the one thing is that the Fangio defense is different for different. Like Gannon, as you know, John, didn't run everything that Vic did. It's sort of like modified, and Sean will have his own concepts as well that he'll bring in. I mean, I think the big counter thing is when you run this style of too high defense and quarters concepts, and you leave yourself vulnerable at the edges and up the middle against the run. So now you're sort of inviting this counterculture of teams that want to start running the ball again, or maybe getting bigger on the running backs, or maybe start throwing to the running backs a little more. It seems to be not as much as it was 10 years ago when you had your Brian Westbrooks of the world. You still have a couple of guys who catch. It just seems like more running backs now catch the ball on dump offs than they do on actual like Texas routes or slot routes or things like that. There aren't that many McCaffreys in the league anymore. There are just guys who catch a lot of dump offs. So it wouldn't surprise me if you start to see a little uprise in that again, an uptick in that of guys catching the ball around the edges, because that's really the areas where the Fangio scheme sort of leaves unaccounted intentionally, because they kind of want you to do that nickel and dime down the field. But teams are getting really good at nickel. The Eagles were one of the best, and Kansas City was one of the best at nickel and diming the ball down the field. They used to be, you can't do that without turning the ball over. Well, a lot of teams are proving that they can do that without turning the ball over.
All right, Jeff, I need an inside the Birds crystal ball view from you for a specific Eagle position. We've seen Howie this offseason reach out for some guys who've had injury issues, as in like missed 3 seasons of his career, injury issues, which brings the cost of doing business down. But you hope that, hey, healthy, if he ever gets to take it out there, he can get back to the level that he was drafted at or once was a player. Who's that wide receiver? Because we all know the Eagles have their 2 superstar wide receivers. They're both great last year, greatest pairing in the history of the Eagles. But you're one turned ankle away from Quez Watkins being your wide receiver 2 again.
Mm-hmm.
You watch Zach Passel go out the door. There's a depth issue at wide receiver right now. Is there that guy, since Howie's in that mode of getting guys inexpensively, who's been a injury issue somewhere else and is actually going to be able to pass the medicals and get on the field? And yes, look at how he found in the discount bin. Is there a wide receiver out there that can interest the Eagles at this stage?
It's funny you bring that up. That's the one position where Howie has tried in the past to find the reclamation projects, and it's only hurt. I mean, going all the way back to Steve Smith from the Giants. And so it's almost like that's the one position you don't want the injury history at. I would have jumped on Isaiah McKenzie from the Bills when they released him. Now, I don't think he has an injury history, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But I do think that they could use a little bit more of a traditional slot receiver. I never thought Quez Watkins was a slot. I think he's an outside receiver who you could have used outside, and they did at times, and then moved a guy like Devontae or A.J. Brown into the slot, which they had done at times, but they also tried to force feed him as a slot receiver, and I just don't see it there. And by the way, Aguilar is somebody I really would have considered bringing back at a 1-year deal
Nelson's
to be a slot receiver. Just I know he's not, but that's the type of receiver I think that they're sort of missing. Someone who gives you a little bit more of a short area quickness than maybe Zach Pascal did. And I like Zach Pascal. I would have brought him back, but someone who gives you a little bit more of that receiving threat around the middle, but is purely a slot guy, and you don't have to put him outside. So that you can draft that guy, Jody. There's probably a million of them still. McKenzie is still, I think. All
right, but I'll go here again. I think I did.
Now, McKenzie signed with somebody.
Oh, did he? I'm sorry. Okay.
I think it was Indy, but I'll
Isaiah McKenzie?
Yeah,
Colts. But let me put this caveat out there, because get a lot of this guys on the stream, calls to the WIP, whatever. Oh, the Eagles will draft one. That's not a problem, because there you go to draft one.
I know.
Not the first or second round, but the Eagles going to draft one. They got a 3rd round pick, and then they got 2 7th round picks. So that's only 3 picks after the 2nd round. They need an extra wide receiver. They could use another safety. They could use a backup cornerback. They could use offensive line depth. They need a developmental quarterback. There's only 3 picks, and 2 of them are in the 7th round. So how are they going to fill all these needs in the draft?
Well, they could possibly a trade down.
Yeah, they're going to trade. He's going to trade down.
Yeah, the only thing is, I think it might be easier for them to trade down from 30 than 10. Only because all the quarterbacks are done right at 8 or 9. Then who are you trading up to 10 for?
Yeah.
So they may have trouble finding buyers. But at 30, maybe somebody wants to move to the back end of the 1st round to get that 5th-year option on a pass rusher or an offensive lineman. We'll see. Or I don't think there'll be any quarterbacks at that point that someone wants.
Depends. Maybe Hooker. But he might go. He might go earlier.
All over the map.
Yeah.
His age might be an issue more so than just the ACL.
Agreed.
But yeah, you want to get that 5th option. That your option that would help. But you're right, Jody. I don't know. There's always the trade market. Although I don't think you're really making a big deal for a slot receiver. There's always, don't forget, One of the best times to get guys is coming out of training camp, the waiver wire, and there's like a million slot receivers every year.
We still got June 1st too. Still got June 1st.
Cuts. Yeah.
At Geoff Mosher NFL, make sure you follow Geoff on Twitter. Does a tremendous job with Adam Kaplan, Inside the Birds, InsideTheBirds.com. Listen to the podcast. To go down this slot, I'm going to give you outside the box thinking. Grant Calcaterra. Let's go big. Let's make Grant Calcaterra a glorified slot receiver.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it like that.
I mean, that's what he does. He's got natural receiving ability. He couldn't block you and me.
Yeah.
So why not take advantage of what he does well?
I mean, it sort of depends on what I guess that wouldn't be too different than a Zach Pascal, who is a bigger wide receiver. I'm sure the weight difference between Pascal and Calcaterra probably isn't all that big.
And maybe he becomes a good blocker from that perspective.
Right.
I know Minnesota's going to do that this year where they signed that kid from Baltimore who's a really good blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, and they're going to use TJ Hawkinson in the slot.
Right. That's good. That's a good point. Yeah, I suppose so. And then you do have Britton Covey, by the way, who's got the traits to be a slot receiver. Now, can he actually handle it? Can he hold up? Who knows? But it will be year 2 for him. And that was where, if you were going to get him on offense, that's where he most projects, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. Anything going to happen in these owner meetings this week that's going to come out of left field and rule changes or different things? I know the whole Amazon getting Thursday night flex scheduling capabilities is going to turn into a huge story if they pass it this week. But other than that, anything we're speculating on, want to take a shot at? Yeah, this is going to happen and nobody's going to see it coming.
There's going to be a lot of executives out with their families, out having drinks. That's what I think is going to happen at the owners' meeting. There's going to be a lot of eating and drinking at the Biltmore, and then a little bit of football conversation will be mixed in between there.
Roger Goodell's new $65 million contract going to get tabled. I don't think it's going to get passed, but it will eventually.
It probably will.
Yeah.
Yeah, Goodell's going nowhere fast. The guy makes too much money for his owners, whether you like him or dislike him. The guy's a good businessman, so he's going to get a contract extension.
Yes,
Most great stuff. Always a pleasure when you jump aboard with us. We do like the backdrop. Feel free to use it again next time when we get you up in about 2 or 3 weeks. Thanks for jumping in with us today.
You got it, fellas. Have a great one.
Thanks,
that man. Is Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast, with his buddy Adam Kaplan jumping in with us here on Birds 365. All right, coming back. We got a couple minutes yet to go. The Monday edition of Birds 365. Stay here.
Go to get your game